Some roles perhaps will then go from a relatively clear traditional approach, and then we'll start a collaboration phase with developed AI within the organization quite early on.
Instead of replacing them, the strategy is to enhance their abilities to get access to that information within that session with the other individuals.
Distributing the ability for non-technical people to really interrogate the data and to answer their own questions.
We actually took full documentation of what the legal guidelines are, implemented it actually in as a review process, so that when a product description comes out of the system, it's already gone through that legal process, even so much to the point where it can rate it on a 1 to 5 risk.
And I suppose my advice for organizations would be to really grasp the nettle and take charge of the story and the narrative that your organization wants to tell around how they're going to use AI.
Let's turn to the human and organizational impacts. I don't really want to spend too long on this slide, but from a UK viewpoint, only last month there was a consultation document published by Bridge AI in connection with the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, part of the UK government. The Office of Artificial Intelligence there wanted to create a national training framework that enabled academia to develop training and also business trainers to develop programs to train the future skills and roles needed within business going forwards. And they have structured it this way. We think it's quite high level, we think it's quite generalistic, but it provides an excellent platform or framework to be thinking about delivering training to specific needs. So I encourage you to go away and have a look at this. If this falls as part of your organizational responsibilities, then I would encourage you to read all of it and digest it. They have these ideas called learner personas. So they organize all colleagues within an organization into these 4 different personas. They then create these dimensions, which I think we would be better described as specific functions or tasks performed within organizations. And then the idea is to map the dimensions into the learners, and that will hopefully generate some very specific training courses that deliver skills and capabilities to business. I think what strikes me as perhaps a limitation of this approach is that the dimensions here, the specific tasks within organizations seem to be very technically orientated, very AI orientated, whereas I think it's better to take a step back from that and think more holistically about organizations. But do have a look at that. The way I think I would see this is very much organizing an organization into these particular tasks. Just to help you to understand this, what this graphic is showing. So if we think about a particular role and think about its evolution from a traditional position in terms of how it executes its role at the moment, which is the green. Some roles perhaps will then go from a relatively clear traditional approach, and then we'll start a collaboration phase with developed AI within the organization quite early on. Some roles will have to be involved with curating the AI to start with. So, for example, relief and development can't just hand over the responsibility or the training tasks to somebody else. They've got R&D people need to be involved with helping to train the AI. And that means a completely different relationship between people and the technology, and people within different functions working collaboratively. So we've shown this curation phase, and there's a very big health warning on this in terms of we really don't have a very clear view, obviously, that these are the timescales that are going to be involved. But we see some tasks have already been largely replaced by AI. Some, for example, the creative tasks will have relatively small amounts of creation opportunity, and people involved with creative functions will be getting quite quickly into collaboration with AI, and we've seen this already. Some roles, if we think about the legal function, for example, involves knowledge, analysis, and advice. And we can project that they will need to help curate the knowledge part of an AI system. We'll have to help develop how that system analyzes the information, and then will be much more of a collaborative relationship when that turns into advice to various parts of the organization. So we hope this gives a bigger picture of how to think about all functions and layers within an organization, and to start to think about each requiring its own progression, its own evolution plan in terms of how it works with AI.
I think the thing that stands out the most as far as our experience with working with organizations to deploy AI integrations is really at the very top of it. Like what are the areas where we're focusing on the most? It's repetition, being able to scale the activities that humans are already doing presently. The anecdote that I like to give is the thing that most people are interested in are chat bots, assistants that give access to information in a conversational manner. And the thing that I find fascinating that has happened so many times that we now recommend this is that we say, instead of replacing the humans that are currently providing these answers, like in a customer service standpoint or some kind of informational standpoint, instead of replacing them, the strategy is to enhance their abilities to get access to that information within that session with the other individuals by giving them the assistant. So we're seeing, using AI to embellish the capabilities of your workers, help them work at scale, to be able to be more productive, instead of replacing them completely with AI technologies. So that to me is really where that repetition part comes from. That's mostly what we're seeing happening today.
It's interesting. A lot of organizations have gone the cost reduction driver route, and where the opportunities have arisen to reduce headcount, they've chosen to do that. But is it fair to say that that's maybe short-term thinking, that they're losing a lot of know-how, knowledge, and actually see roles more as something that's going to evolve and morph into something very different, but we still need those people? What do you think?
Well, I can tell you that the curious parallel between the evolution of today's AI discussions, that kind of started about a year ago, and the fact that there's been a bit of an economic downturn, which has led to layoffs a lot, in the tech sector, has been very curious to watch. Meaning, like, we have clients at enterprise level who had to get rid of entire departments, like, for example, like copywriters, for example, and AI, it has made them more aggressive in their adoption of AI, has allowed them to embellish that level of productivity, depending on what the work is. AI can actually help embellish that or make up for the loss of workers, rather than intentionally get rid of workers because AI has been more productive.
Thank you. Let's start thinking about some specific examples. Oliver, let me draw you in here. The relationship between tech people and other functions is going to change quite a bit, isn't it? How do you see things changing collaboratively?
I think going forward, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on embedded data professionals into all the rest of the functions of the business. There are a lot of companies that already do that, but it's not ubiquitous. But the real advantage there is, if we're assuming that the pattern going forward is that non-technical workers are going to be able to use their actual experience to become teachers and supervisors of their own AI assistants that are going to improve their productivity. Having that distance between data professionals who are going to be able to make sure the tuning of these models is successful, you kind of need to really reduce those barriers. So see a lot more emphasis on embedding those two functions. And it kind of goes back to then the priority really is how you get the physical experience of non-technical workers into a data structure that can be manipulated by data professionals. But then I think a lot of people have on their roadmaps of talking about data democratization. Hopefully it's not a new term for everyone. That's really going to have to expand and keep improving in terms of distributing the ability for non-technical people to really interrogate the data and to answer their own questions. So we really should be kind of thinking about whether embedding their data professionals into non-technical teams would help them work for your organization.
So we've shown that here in terms of having the tech people having more of an influence and embracing and overlapping with the other functions. It's interesting, if we take customer services, for example, that the chatbot is the example of most people's experience with customer services teams. As AI becomes more familiar with how organizations work, that instead of being programmed to follow a particular logic path to provide answers, that it can start to explore and start to provide solutions. I suppose as we move more towards a general AI, But it's interesting to just understand that different departments are going to go through different speeds of acceleration and consolidation.
The thing that's most fascinating to me is down at even at the programming level. Like, for example, for organizations to be, I guess the hypothesis here is the tech professionals within organizations might not be as important to the growth and adoption of AI as maybe they had been in more traditional coding environment. So like, for example, if your organization wants to adopt applications that require Python or JavaScript or other type of implicit programming languages, you need tech professionals with that knowledge set. The programming language for manipulating language models is natural language, like literally like grade school level English and sentence structure understanding and being able to prompt in that natural language is really the amazing thing that we've seen from language models today. So it sort of lessens the reliance upon technical professionals within organizations. And then, maybe I believe, and we've seen this happen, provide more opportunity for non-technicals who might have different relationships with the information and see the value of the relationship of the data to the organization. So to me, that's like kind of the really fascinating part, to like really focus the lens very acutely on that part of it.
Yeah, indeed. And if we look at some of the other functions here, we've got product development where that AI has already had a lot of influence. People are developing products with AI assistance. I mean, we've used the example of NVIDIA that is using its own AI to design better chips to produce better AI. And could you give any further examples of where product development is already being transformed here?
Well, you see a huge impact on anywhere where focus groups are used. AIs can perform, very well at providing, objective feedback or defined feedback. You can define what a persona is and expose them to, one of your product strategies, or ask them if a certain feature is interesting. And whereas humans are available to actually do that, you can do this at scale. An excellent example is just, while it does kind of go into the legal function as well too, there's consultants and organizations that do jury. You can hire out an organization to go and put together like several faux juries and see what they would think about your certain approach. You can do that with AI, and we're actually working with the groups that do that with AI. You can scale that up instantaneously and achieve the same type of thing. So again, it's about scale and, being able to do these things quickly, and the impact that has on product development, as you can imagine, would be very important. You can achieve a lot more with the same amount of resources that you have available to you already.
Thank you. And at this point, we all start to get our fears under control. The legal function is an interesting one from my perspective, because it involves three layers of knowledge, analysis, and advice. With the legal function, already most legal functions have access to external practice manuals, effectively, where you can interrogate laws of various different jurisdictions and get some headline advice. But often then it needs to be taken a little bit further, and some analysis and applying that to a specific set of circumstances before one gets into advice. And but I can imagine that that the platform for the legal function, in terms of the internal external practice manual, can be, it's not a big step to replace that with an AI system, but then actually asking a legal function to help train AI to apply it to specific circumstances in terms of the legal analysis, and then start to develop relatively straightforward levels of advice without getting into anything particularly contentious yet. But one can see how one's going to have to have a conversation with the legal function amongst many, as to how is this going to work within your organization? How are we going to get lawyers to train and transfer their knowledge and insights to AI?
I think Chris was talking about reinforcement learning earlier, and Tony as well. Operating with AI is going to look very different whether you're a creative versus a legal function, depending on really accurate information from a legal solution versus having kind of an open-ended questions in a creative sense. When
we're developing customized AI implementations, we, in a number of different cases, consult with the legal departments within organizations to give us baselines and guidance essentially guardrails. A great example I can give you is we have an organization that we use that uses AI to create product descriptions. And so that the AI system is not creating a legal situation by making promises or claims about that product's capabilities, we actually took full documentation of what the legal guidelines are, implemented it actually in as a review process, so that when a product description comes out of the system, it's already gone through that legal process, even so much to the point where it can rate it on a 1 to 5 risk, isolate specific claims that might be worrisome, and even provide suggestions to changing what those claims might be. So it's really an example of taking the knowledge of the humans that are in charge of enforcing these legal guidelines and being able to, distribute that at scale as well.
I've had a question, won't lawyers think they are turkeys voting for Christmas? Well, that can be applied to every single function within organizations over the next 5 to 10, 15 years. So how do talent and HR professionals start to plan towards having a conversation with people that doesn't involve, we're going to downsize you by 80% in 5 years? That's not the opening conversation, but perhaps is more towards, actually, we all need to be embracing this, and we all need to be changing the nature of our roles so it becomes much more training, much more collaborative, using the AI as an assistant to us to perform our jobs better, quicker, and more impactfully. So it's not necessarily just an AI into the legal advisor and replacing the legal advisor, but isn't it much more about an entirely different way of thinking about the relationship between people and technology? Tamara, what do you think?
Well, as you were talking, I was feeling that there's already quite a strong narrative and story about this that's circulating. And I suppose my advice for organizations would be to really grasp the nettle and take charge of the story and the narrative that your organization wants to tell around how they're going to use AI. And part of that will be tackling head on in a very transparent way the fears that people have. Nobody is going to be thinking clearly or collaboratively if their brain is full of the hormones of threat. So really tackling that and being honest about that, I think, is a starting point. Trying to explore in a collaborative way, there's that word again, where could this make your work better? So in the field of psychology, there's some big discussions going on about whether conversational AIs can replace psychologies. And actually what's getting many people excited is there's a huge need that's not being met. So part of the fear is tempered because there's a very real problem that this could solve. Now, we want to go really carefully and de-chunk and try to understand in a much more nuanced and deeper way, but where will it help and where will it harm? And where will it bring benefit? And where will it be, potentially with some unseen circumstances? And you'll only get that knowledge by talking to people on the ground. I think Oliver once mentioned something that stuck with me, which was, there might be a tendency to think, well, if we've got this AI, we don't need the data scientists. But actually, you do need the data scientists, but you might need to shift and augment their roles, and their role might now be embedded in other teams and acting like a bridge. Final point, which is what always strikes me in these conversations, is it's probably not going to be the thing that you think it is, where AI is going to have the impact. That just always strikes me when I speak to Chris. It strikes me when Oliver speaks about this. I think Tony's experience speaks to this as well. We have all these assumptions and stories and narratives, but then it's like, but actually, look, there's something over here which we didn't even think of. And I love the idea that the non-technical person is now able to interrogate the data of the organization. That's beginner's mind. And that is when it really potentially gets exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Because
so in summary, I think we would say it's wrong to think of it that actually these roles are going to end, that actually to think more of in terms of an explosion of doing things differently. We are part of the process, and it's something that we should be actively embracing, not fearing. As we embrace and as we shape it, we evolve ourselves and we have a bigger impact on our organizations accordingly. Instead of replacing the legal function, it's making the legal function more accessible and having a greater impact and a more positive impact around the organization. We're going to have to end this part here because we're running short of time.